Sarah Martinez had dreamed of becoming a Marine sniper since she was 12 years old, watching documentaries about military precision shooters with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran. Growing up in rural Texas, she spent countless hours at the family ranch, perfecting her aim with hunting rifles and developing an almost supernatural understanding of wind patterns, bullet trajectory, and breathing control. Her grandfather taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger, it was about becoming one with the weapon, understanding its personality, and respecting the responsibility that came with such deadly accuracy. When Sarah enlisted at 18, she was already an exceptional marksman. During basic training at Paris Island, her drill instructors were amazed by her natural ability. While other recruits struggled to hit targets at 200 yards, Sarah was consistently placing shots within a 2-inch grouping at 500 yards using standard-issue rifles. Her precision was so remarkable that word spread quickly through the training base. Senior officers began observing her range sessions, whispering among themselves about the young woman who shot like she had been born with a rifle in her hands. The path to becoming a Marine sniper was notoriously difficult, and even more challenging for women. Only a handful of female Marines had ever qualified for the elite Scout Sniper School, and the pressure to prove herself was immense. Sarah's commanding officers were initially supportive, recognizing her exceptional talent and recommending her for advanced marksmanship training. She excelled in every preliminary test, outperforming male counterparts who had years more experience. Her accuracy scores were consistently in the top 5%, and her understanding of ballistics impressed even the most seasoned instructors. However, as Sarah progressed through the selection process, she began to notice subtle changes in how she was treated. Some of her fellow Marines, particularly those who had been passed over for sniper training, started making snide comments about special treatment for women. They questioned whether she truly earned her scores, or if the Corps was simply trying to meet diversity quotas. The whispers followed her everywhere in the mess hall, during PT sessions, and even in her barracks. Despite the growing hostility, Sarah remained focused on her goal, knowing that her performance would ultimately speak louder than any rumors. The real problems began when she was officially accepted into Scout Sniper School. On her first day, she was assigned a rifle that would become her primary weapon throughout training, a customized M40A 5-bolt-action sniper rifle. The weapon was supposed to be precision-tuned for accuracy, capable of hitting targets at distances exceeding 1,000 yards. Every sniper student received a weapon that had been zeroed and calibrated by the armory, ensuring consistent performance during the grueling weeks of training ahead. From her very first range session, Sarah knew something was wrong with her rifle. The shots that should have been hitting center mass were consistently pulling to the left and high. During her initial qualification shoot, she managed only average scores, a dramatic departure from her usual exceptional performance. Her instructors were puzzled, having expected her to excel immediately. The weapon felt different in her hands, and despite her years of experience, she couldn't seem to compensate for whatever was causing the erratic shot placement. Sarah spent hours that first evening cleaning and inspecting her rifle, checking every component she could access. The scope appeared to be properly mounted, the barrel seemed clean, and the action cycled smoothly. Yet something was fundamentally wrong with the weapon's accuracy. She had grown up around firearms and had an intuitive sense for when a rifle wasn't performing correctly. This weapon felt sabotaged, though she couldn't yet prove it or understand exactly what had been done. The next morning brought another disappointing range session. While her classmates were hitting targets with impressive consistency, Sarah struggled to maintain even basic accuracy standards. Her shots continued to group poorly, and she found herself falling behind in the competitive ranking that determined who would continue in the program. The instructors began questioning whether she truly belonged in the school, wondering if her earlier performances had been flukes or the result of favorable conditions. During lunch break, Sarah overheard a conversation between two male students that chilled her to the bone. They were joking about how certain people didn't deserve to be in the program and how sometimes weapons needed adjustment to level the playing field. The implications were clear, though they spoke in coded language that couldn't be directly confronted. Sarah realized that her suspicions were correct. Someone had deliberately tampered with her rifle to ensure her failure. That evening, Sarah made a decision that would define her entire military career. Rather than report the suspected sabotage through official channels, which would likely result in lengthy investigations and potential retaliation, she decided to fix the problem herself. She had learned enough about rifle mechanics from her grandfather and through her own extensive shooting experience to troubleshoot the weapon systematically. If someone had sabotaged her rifle, she would discover exactly what they had done and correct it without their knowledge. Working by lamplight in a quiet corner of the armory after hours, Sarah began the most thorough inspection of her rifle that she had ever attempted. She carefully removed the scope, checking the mounting rings and bases for any signs of tampering. Everything appeared normal at first glance, but as she examined each component more closely, she began to notice subtle irregularities. The scope rings seemed to be slightly loose despite appearing properly tightened, and there were tiny scratches on the mounting screws that suggested recent adjustment. Her investigation revealed the cruel genius of the sabotage. Someone had carefully loosened the scope mounts just enough to allow slight movement during firing, creating unpredictable shot placement while maintaining the appearance of a properly configured weapon. Additionally, they had inserted thin shims in the stock bedding, slightly altering the barrel's relationship to the rest of the rifle and further degrading accuracy. These modifications were virtually invisible to casual inspection but devastating to precision shooting. The sabotage had been executed by someone with considerable knowledge of rifle mechanics, likely a fellow student or even an instructor who wanted to see her fail. The modifications were subtle enough that they might never have been discovered through normal troubleshooting procedures. Sarah felt a mixture of anger and determination as she understood the extent of the plot against her. Someone had invested significant time and effort to ensure her failure, but they had underestimated her mechanical aptitude and her refusal to give up. Working through the night, Sarah carefully corrected each problem she had discovered. She removed the unauthorized shims, properly torqued the scope mounting hardware, and made minute adjustments to ensure perfect alignment. She also discovered that someone had slightly loosened the action screws, affecting the rifle's consistency. By dawn, she had restored her weapon to proper configuration, though she was exhausted from the all-night repair session. The question now was whether her repairs would be sufficient to overcome weeks of poor performance and regain her standing in the program. Sarah had fallen significantly behind her classmates in scoring, and she would need exceptional performances in the remaining qualification shoots to avoid being dropped from the course. More importantly, she would need to accomplish this while maintaining the secret of what she had discovered, knowing that revealing the sabotage might lead to even more serious retaliation from whoever was responsible. The morning after Sarah's late-night rifle repair session, she arrived at the range feeling a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. She had managed only 2 hours of sleep, but her weapon felt different in her hands, more familiar, more responsive. The subtle wrongness that had plagued her shooting for weeks was gone, replaced by the solid, reliable feel she remembered from her best firearms. As she prepared for the day's qualification shoot, she kept her discovery secret, knowing that revealing the sabotage could lead to investigations that might derail her training entirely. Her first shot of the day was a revelation. The bullet struck exactly where she had aimed, hitting the center of the target at 300 yards with the precision she had always taken for granted. The second shot grouped within an inch of the first, and the third completed a tight triangle that would have impressed even veteran snipers. Sarah felt a surge of relief mixed with burning anger as she realized just how much the sabotage had been affecting her performance. For the first time in weeks, she was shooting like herself again. The range instructor noticed the dramatic improvement immediately. Where Sarah had been struggling to meet minimum standards just days before, she was now outperforming most of her classmates. Her shots were consistently hitting the center rings of targets at distances that challenged even experienced marksmen. The instructor approached her position with curiosity, wondering what had caused such a sudden transformation in her shooting ability. Sarah maintained her composure as the instructor questioned her about the improvement. She explained that she had been working on her breathing technique and had made some adjustments to her shooting position. These were truthful statements, though they didn't reveal the real reason for her enhanced performance. The instructor seemed satisfied with her explanation, noting that sometimes students experienced breakthrough moments when everything clicked into place. As the day progressed, Sarah's confidence grew with each successful shot. She was not only meeting the qualification standards but exceeding them by significant margins. Her shot groups were among the tightest in the class, and her ability to hit targets at extended ranges was drawing attention from senior instructors who had begun observing her shooting. Word was spreading that the female Marine who had been struggling was now demonstrating exceptional marksmanship skills. However, Sarah soon realized that her improved performance was creating new problems. The same people who had likely been responsible for sabotaging her rifle were now witnessing her sudden success, and their reactions ranged from suspicious to openly hostile. During breaks between shooting sessions, she noticed increased scrutiny from certain classmates who seemed disturbed by her transformation from struggling student to top performer. The subtle harassment that had been present throughout her training intensified as her scores improved. Equipment would mysteriously go missing from her assigned space, her gear would be moved or tampered with, and she would receive anonymous notes suggesting that women didn't belong in elite military units. The psychological pressure was designed to break her concentration and undermine her confidence. But Sarah had experienced enough adversity in her young life to recognize these tactics for what they were. During the advanced training phases, students were required to demonstrate their skills under increasingly challenging conditions. Night shooting, moving targets, and environmental obstacles were all part of the curriculum, designed to prepare future snipers for real-world combat situations. Sarah excelled in each of these areas, her natural shooting ability, enhanced by the properly functioning rifle, and her determination to prove herself worthy of the program. One particularly challenging exercise required students to engage multiple targets at varying distances while under time pressure. The scenario simulated a combat situation where quick, accurate shots could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah approached the exercise with the same methodical preparation she brought to all her shooting, carefully calculating distances, wind conditions, and target priorities. When her turn came, Sarah moved through the course with fluid precision that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Her first shot eliminated a target at 800 yards, followed immediately by a successful engagement at 400 yards. She transitioned smoothly between positions, her rifle tracking across the landscape as she identified and engaged each target in optimal sequence. Her final shot of the exercise struck a challenging target at 600 yards, completing the course with a perfect score in record time. The instructor conducting the exercise was visibly impressed, marking Sarah's performance as one of the best he had seen in years of training Marine snipers. Her combination of speed and accuracy demonstrated the kind of skill that separated truly exceptional marksmen from merely competent ones. For the first time since beginning the program, Sarah felt that she was being recognized for her actual abilities rather than being judged by her gender. However, her success was creating dangerous enemies among those who had worked to undermine her. That evening, she discovered that someone had broken into her personal locker and damaged several pieces of her equipment. Her backup rifle scope had been deliberately scratched, rendering it useless, and her range estimation tools had been tampered with in ways that would have caused significant errors if she hadn't noticed the damage. Sarah realized that the sabotage was escalating beyond simple equipment tampering. The people responsible were becoming desperate as their initial plan failed, and they were now willing to take greater risks to ensure her failure. She began to understand that her situation was more dangerous than she had initially realized. These weren't just pranks or hazing, but deliberate attempts to end her military career and potentially put her in physical danger. The final phase of Scout Sniper School included a comprehensive evaluation that would determine which students graduated and received the coveted sniper designation. This evaluation consisted of multiple shooting tests, written examinations, and practical exercises that demonstrated mastery of all the skills taught during the program. Students who failed any portion of the evaluation were immediately removed from the program, regardless of their previous performance. Sarah prepared for the final evaluation with the knowledge that her enemies would likely make one last attempt to sabotage her success. She took extraordinary precautions with her equipment, never leaving her rifle unattended and personally inspecting every piece of gear before each use. She also began documenting the harassment and equipment tampering she had experienced, creating a detailed record that could be used if the situation escalated further. The first day of final evaluations focused on long-range precision shooting under ideal conditions. Students were required to engage targets at distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 yards, demonstrating their ability to make the kinds of shots that would be expected of them in combat. Sarah approached each shot with the same methodical precision that had become her trademark, carefully accounting for environmental factors and equipment variables. Her performance during the precision shooting phase was flawless. Every shot struck within the scoring rings, with most hitting the center areas that represented perfect accuracy. Her consistency across all distances demonstrated a level of skill that exceeded the minimum requirements by substantial margins. The evaluating instructors noted her exceptional performance, recognizing that they were witnessing something special. As the evaluation continued into more complex scenarios, Sarah maintained her high level of performance, while remaining vigilant for any signs of sabotage. She had learned to trust her instincts about equipment problems, and was quick to identify any irregularities that might indicate tampering. Her heightened awareness served her well, as she discovered and corrected several minor issues that could have affected her performance if left unaddressed. The penultimate day of evaluation included a comprehensive field exercise that tested all aspects of sniper training in a realistic scenario. Students were required to plan and execute a simulated mission that included target identification, range estimation, environmental assessment, and precision engagement under time pressure. Sarah's performance during this exercise would largely determine her final ranking and whether she would graduate from the program. The final evaluation day arrived with an exercise that would become legendary in Marine Corps sniper training history. The test was designed to push students beyond their limits, requiring them to engage an unprecedented number of targets under increasingly challenging conditions. The course included 324 individual targets placed at varying distances, elevations, and environmental conditions that would test every skill learned during the program. No student had ever achieved a perfect score on this evaluation, and most considered hitting 250 targets successfully to be an exceptional performance. Sarah arrived at the range before dawn, using the quiet morning hours to prepare her equipment and mentally rehearse the complex shooting sequence ahead. She had studied the course layout extensively, identifying optimal shooting positions and calculating preliminary range estimates for clusters of targets. Her rifle had been meticulously cleaned and inspected, with every component verified to ensure peak performance. She knew this would be her final opportunity to prove herself worthy of the sniper designation. As other students and instructors gathered for the evaluation, Sarah noticed the same faces that had been present during her earlier struggles. Some of the Marines who had likely sabotaged her rifle were now watching with expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. They seemed confident that she would fail under the pressure of the most challenging test in the program, unaware that their sabotage had actually made her stronger and more determined than ever. The evaluation began with targets at moderate distances in ideal shooting conditions. Sarah's first shot struck the center of a target at 400 yards, followed by a smooth transition to engage a target at 350 yards. Her movements were fluid and confident, demonstrating the kind of natural shooting ability that couldn't be taught or faked. Each shot was calculated and precise, with no wasted motion or hesitation in her technique. As the exercise progressed to more challenging targets, Sarah's performance became even more impressive. She successfully engaged targets partially concealed behind obstacles, compensating for wind drift across open terrain, and making elevation adjustments for targets positioned on steep slopes. Her understanding of ballistics and environmental factors was evident in every shot, as she consistently struck targets that would have challenged experienced combat snipers. The range instructors began taking notice as Sarah's hit count climbed steadily past 50, then 100, then 150 targets without a single miss. Her consistency was unprecedented in the history of the evaluation, and word began spreading among the staff that something extraordinary was happening on the range. Senior officers who had heard about the exceptional performance started arriving to witness what was becoming a historic achievement. By the halfway point of the evaluation, Sarah had achieved what most students considered a perfect score. She had successfully engaged every target presented to her. However, the exercise was far from over, and the remaining targets would test her endurance and mental focus as much as her shooting skills. The pressure of maintaining perfect accuracy while hundreds of people watched was immense. But Sarah drew strength from the knowledge that she had overcome deliberate sabotage to reach this moment. The advanced portion of the evaluation included targets that required complex calculations and split-second decision-making. Moving targets, targets visible only briefly through narrow windows, and long-range shots that pushed the limits of her rifle's effective range were all part of the challenge. Sarah approached each of these obstacles with the same methodical precision that had carried her through the earlier phases, never allowing the mounting pressure to affect her technique. Target number 200 fell to a shot that required her to compensate for a 15-mile-per-hour crosswind while engaging a partially concealed target at 900 yards. Target number 250 was eliminated with a shot that threaded between two obstacles to strike a small exposure at extreme range. Each successful engagement added to the legend that was building around her performance, as even the most experienced snipers in attendance acknowledged that they were witnessing something special. As Sarah approached the final phase of the evaluation, The atmosphere on the range had become electric with anticipation. No one had ever come close to hitting every target in this evaluation, and the possibility that she might achieve a perfect score was drawing attention from throughout the base. The same people who had tried to sabotage her success were now watching in stunned silence as she systematically eliminated every target in the course. The last 24 targets were positioned at the maximum range of her rifle, requiring shots that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. These targets were barely visible through her scope, appearing as small dots against the horizon that required perfect calculations and flawless execution to hit. Sarah took extra time with each of these final shots, double-checking her range estimates and wind calculations before squeezing the trigger. Target number 300 fell to a shot that pushed her rifle to its absolute limits, the bullet traveling over 1,100 yards before striking the small metal plate with a distinctive ring that carried clearly across the silent range. The crowd of observers had grown throughout the day, and the tension was palpable as Sarah prepared for the final 24 shots that would determine whether she achieved the impossible. With each successful shot among the final targets, the significance of what was happening became increasingly clear to everyone present. Sarah wasn't just passing the evaluation, she was setting a standard that might never be equaled. Her technique remained flawless despite the mounting pressure, her breathing steady and controlled as she engaged each target with the same precision that had characterized her shooting throughout the day. Target number 324, the final shot of the evaluation, required everything Sarah had learned about long-range shooting. The target was positioned at maximum range on an elevated platform, with crosswinds that would affect bullet trajectory significantly. She took several minutes to calculate the shot, considering every environmental factor that might influence the bullet's path. The entire range fell silent as she settled into her shooting position for the final time. The shot broke cleanly, the rifle recoiling smoothly against her shoulder as the bullet began its long journey to the distant target. For several seconds, the only sound was the wind rustling through the grass as hundreds of people watched through binoculars and spotting scopes. Then the distinctive ring of bullet-striking metal echoed across the range, confirming that Sarah had achieved the impossible, a perfect score of 324 out of 324 targets. The explosion of cheers and applause that erupted from the assembled crowd was unlike anything ever heard on a Marine Corps rifle range. Even the instructors, who maintained strict military bearing, were openly celebrating as they realized they had witnessed a historic achievement. Sarah had not only graduated from Scout Sniper School but had done so with a performance that would be talked about for generations. In the immediate aftermath of her perfect performance, several of the Marines who had sabotaged her rifle approached to offer grudging congratulations. Their expressions revealed a mixture of shock, respect, and something approaching shame as they realized that their attempts to derail her career had ultimately failed. Sarah accepted their handshakes with quiet dignity, knowing that her performance had spoken louder than any words could have. The official investigation that followed Sarah's graduation revealed the extent of the sabotage she had endured and overcome. The Marines responsible were court-martialed and removed from service, but Sarah felt no satisfaction in their punishment. She had proven everything she needed to prove through her shooting, and she was more interested in moving forward with her career than dwelling on past injustices. Sarah's record-setting performance became a case study taught in military schools and a source of inspiration for future generations of Marine snipers. Her story demonstrated that excellence could overcome prejudice and that determination combined with skill could achieve seemingly impossible goals. More importantly, her success opened doors for other women to pursue elite military roles, showing that gender had no bearing on a person's ability to serve their country with distinction. Years later, as a decorated combat veteran and instructor, Sarah would often reflect on the day she hit 324 consecutive targets. She understood that the sabotage, as cruel as it had been, had ultimately made her stronger and more resilient. The experience taught her that true excellence couldn't be undermined by others' prejudices, and that the most powerful response to discrimination was simply to be better than anyone expected possible.